Rabbits. Florida scientists hope that these fluffy decoys can help with a very real problem.
Yeah, Burmese pythons have devastated native wildlife in the Everglades.
Imagine this. Deep in the swamps of Florida, where grass grows taller than a person, where the water hides everything beyond arm's reach, and where every rustle at night could mean danger, rabbits have started running along the trails. Only these aren't ordinary rabbits. They're not real. They're robotic. And they've been sent into the heart of the Everglades with one goal: to lure out and stop Burmese pythons that have been turning this unique region into an ecological disaster zone for years. And what happened next surprised even the people who came up with the idea. If this sounds like the plot of a science fiction thriller, you're not alone. Robots disguised as prey, snakes as long as a car, swamps that are nearly impossible to navigate, and a team of people trying to save one of the most fragile ecosystems in the United States. But this is exactly what the fight against one of the most dangerous invasive threats in the US looks like today. To understand why anyone would think of releasing mechanical rabbits into the swamps, we need to go back a bit. Burmese pythons were never supposed to end up in Florida. Their natural habitat is thousands of miles away in Southeast Asia, but at some point, exotic snakes began entering the state through the pet trade. Some were released by owners, others may have escaped. And the Everglades, warm, humid, and full of hiding places, turned out to be almost the perfect new home for them. The problem is that adult Burmese pythons in Florida have virtually no natural predators, and there was more than enough food. Raccoons, opossums, foxes, marsh rabbits, birds, young alligators, deer. The pythons began reproducing rapidly and gradually expanding their territory. Over time, scientists started noticing a disturbing pattern. Populations of small and medium-sized mammals in some areas simply collapsed. Places where animals were once common fell into an eerie silence. And this is where things get complicated. Catching a Burmese python in the Everglades is nothing like finding a snake in a zoo or on a farm. The Everglades is vast, tangled, and partially flooded a maze of water, mud, tall vegetation, canals, and swamps. A python can lie completely still for hours, even days, and remain almost invisible. It blends perfectly into its surroundings. You could walk within a couple of meters of it and never realize that a massive snake weighing dozens of kilograms is right there. That's why traditional methods often prove too slow. People patrol at night with flashlights. Trained hunters search roads and canals. Dogs are used. Some male pythons are fitted with radio transmitters to help locate females during breeding season. But the problem is so large, and the terrain so difficult, that specialists are constantly searching for smarter approaches. One of the most unusual ideas sounded almost crazy. What if, instead of searching for the python where it's hiding, you make it come out on its own? What if you use its instincts against it? Instead of fighting the swamp directly, you play on one of the oldest mechanisms in nature hunting. That's how robotic rabbits came into the picture. At first glance, the concept seems strange, but it has a hard logic behind it. For a predator, prey isn't just an object, it's a set of signals: movement, heat, scent, sometimes sound. A python doesn't chase like a wolf, it waits. It reads the slightest changes in its environment. It approaches. Then it strikes suddenly, almost without warning. So if you can create a convincing enough decoy, you might not just attract the snake, you can make it reveal itself. These robo-rabbits weren't designed as toys or as flashy experiments. They were built to survive harsh conditions: mud, water, heat, and impact. Inside were movement systems, heat modules, sometimes sensors, cameras, or transmitters. On the outside, a shape that roughly resembled typical prey in the swamp ecosystem. The goal wasn't to create a perfect replica of a rabbit, but to trigger a predator's instinct strongly enough to provoke an attack, or at least an approach. Picture the scene. Night. The swamp is alive. Water barely ripples. Birds cry somewhere in the distance. An alligator moves in the darkness. And along the edge of tall grass, a small rabbit-like figure begins to twitch. It doesn't run too fast. it doesn't behave perfectly. In fact, it moves like something vulnerable, like easy prey. And nearby, just a few meters away, hidden in water or brush, a python may already be lying motionless, waiting. When these devices were first tested, many were skeptical. And understandably so. Snakes aren't video game characters you can lure with a scripted mechanic. They're unpredictable predators in an environment humans barely control. No one could guarantee the pythons would react at all. But the results turned out to be far more interesting than expected. The pythons did respond. Some approached cautiously, as if evaluating what they were seeing. Others reacted almost instantly. The hunting instinct kicked in. In some cases, the strikes were so fast, the robot practically vanished in the attack. And that's exactly what researchers needed: data, direction, and confirmation of where the snake was hiding. But perhaps the most surprising part wasn't just that the pythons attacked, it was what scientists learned from their behavior. It turned out that pythons use specific routes, prefer certain hiding spots, and are more active at particular times and places. For those fighting an invasive species, this kind of insight is incredibly valuable. Because the biggest challenge isn't just the number of snakes, it's their invisibility. You can't effectively control what you can barely detect. And if a technology can turn a hidden predator into one that reveals its position, that changes everything. Before, much of the effort relied on patience, luck, and individual expertise. Now there's an added layer: actively provoking contact. Not waiting for chance encounters, but creating situations where the snake has to expose itself. Some tests showed something else important. Even when a python didn't attack immediately, it might begin tracking the decoy, and that alone was useful. It meant the device was doing its job, triggering movement, curiosity, a shift in behavior that could be monitored. There's even a cinematic quality to it. Imagine researchers in a boat watching sensor data as a mechanical rabbit moves in the dark. Nothing happens. Minutes pass. It seems like another empty attempt. Then, suddenly something changes. A signal spikes. A camera catches motion. The rabbit disappears. And just like that, you know, there's a python there. For Florida, this may not just be an experiment, it could mark the beginning of a new phase in ecological management. Because the python problem has long outgrown isolated encounters. It's about restoring balance to an entire ecosystem. Invasive predators disrupt food chains. Species disappear, behavior changes, pressure builds on already vulnerable animals, and even if you don't see it directly, the system begins to lose stability. Burmese pythons are especially dangerous because of their reproductive capacity. A large female can lay dozens of eggs. That means every undetected adult can trigger another wave of population growth. Early detection is everything, and that's exactly where robotic decoys can make a difference. Of course, robo-rabbits aren't a magic solution. They won't clear the Everglades in a month. They won't replace humans, field patrols, biologists, or monitoring programs. The ecosystem is too vast, the problem too complex. But in long-term environmental battles, success often comes from combining methods. And if one approach gives even a modest advantage, it can shift the outcome over time. What makes this story especially compelling is the contrast. On one side, an ancient, highly adapted predator, perfected by evolution for stealth and precision. On the other, human engineering, responding not with brute force, but with strategy, using a small artificial animal to outsmart a powerful invader. There's something symbolic in that. Sometimes the biggest ecological problems can't be solved directly. You have to understand behavior, adapt, and work within nature's logic. And this approach could extend far beyond pythons. Robotic decoys might one day help monitor elusive species, protect endangered animals, or control other invasive populations, all while minimizing human impact. Still, what captivates people most is the sheer irony. A massive snake capable of swallowing prey whole goes after a small rabbit, only for the rabbit to turn out to be a robot. Nature thinks it's found an easy meal. Instead, it reveals itself. And behind that is a very human hope, that even when a problem seems overwhelming, a clever solution can still make a difference. The most important result of these experiments isn't just the number of snakes found, it's the proof that pythons can be actively tracked, provoked, and studied in ways once thought impossible. That means Florida may finally have a chance not just to react, but to anticipate. And that matters, because invasive species are one of the most underestimated threats of the 21st century. Unlike deforestation or pollution, they work quietly, reshaping ecosystems from within. No explosions, no headlines, just gradual, often invisible change. Until one day, the animals are gone. If technologies like these robotic decoys can help respond faster, they matter far beyond a single swamp in Florida. There's also a broader lesson. Conservation work rarely looks dramatic. It's years of observation, failed experiments, harsh conditions, and relentless problem solving. So when something like robo-rabbits produces real results, it's more than a curiosity, it's a breakthrough earned through persistence. The big question remains, can pythons in the Everglades truly be defeated? The honest answer is probably not completely. In some areas, it may already be too late for total eradication. But there's a vast difference between total victory and doing nothing. Populations can be controlled, key areas can be protected, pressure on vulnerable species can be reduced. Sometimes, that is what winning looks like. Robotic rabbits don't turn this into a fairy tale with a perfect ending, but they do turn it into a story where humans have a real chance, one driven not by panic, but by intelligence and creativity. And maybe that's what modern environmental battles are supposed to look like. Strange, bold, technological, and very deliberate. So next time you hear that mechanical rabbits are running through the swamps of Florida at night, don't be too quick to smile. Behind that strange image is a serious fight for the survival of an entire ecosystem. And if a small robotic rabbit can help outsmart one of the most dangerous invaders in the Everglades, then maybe the most incredible results are still ahead.